This feels so wrong. What's good, Super Riders? The last time you saw me, I was struggling with this little tool here. I was trying to install these new hydraulic brake levers on my trials bike, and I broke this piece somehow. I have no idea. And I ordered a new one, but then in the time that I was waiting for it to show up, I went back to the Magura website. And you know what they suggested? Use a hammer. So what I ended up doing, I got a vise here, and there's a little block that shows up with the Magura installation kit, and you just put the line in there, you drop the barb in, and you just lightly tap this barb piece in there, and it magically goes in. So instead of getting some crazy expensive tool to do it, you just use a hammer instead. Whatever, it worked. So the next thing we're gonna do, we're gonna finish installing the hoses, we're gonna bleed the brakes, we're gonna grind the rims, and then we can finally get a proper test on this bike with the new bar and stem. I don't know if there's anything better than new grip day. It makes the whole bike just kind of feel fresh. So I'm running these Deity Slim Fit lock-ons, and a lot of people right now are running these road bike handlebar wraps around their handlebars so they get maximum control, they have a really thin grip. And the good thing about these is that they're probably about the same size grip, but you've got a lock onto them. So like road bike stuff sometimes comes undone or it gets kind of weird. This is just a lock-on grip that's about the same diameter as if you did have a really thin road bike grip on there. So I'm running these. You guys know I put Deity stuff on pretty much all of my bikes. They're my homies and I just want to support them. So I've got some Deity gear on this bike too. Next thing on our agenda is bleeding these brakes. We put new levers on, which means we need to do a full bleed of both lines. I'm not going to give the full how-to of bleeding brakes by any means, but I do want to share a couple hacks with you. And this first one is maybe one of the most well-known hacks when it comes to Maguras. Instead of buying the Royal Blood, which is this blue hydraulic oil that they usually put in all of their brakes, I recommend that you get a thing of mineral oil. This is like 1/10 of the cost and you can get way bigger quantities of it. And especially if you're new to bleeding Magura brakes, you probably want to have a bit more fluid on hand, because if you're really great at it, you can get by with a little vial like this, but usually you mess up 2 or 3 different times and you just don't want to be stressed out on running out of oil. So maybe start with mineral oil until you really get it figured out, and then move back to the Royal Blood if you want to be all fancy and have the standard Magura oil in there. I feel like a mad scientist every single time I do this. This is going to make a lot more sense when you're kind of in it by yourself, but what I want to tell you is that when you have both lines open like this, you want to close the cylinder first, but you need to take your lever and put it below so that the gravity doesn't force all the fluid to flow out of the cylinder. So the cylinder should be the highest point, and you close that, and then you bring your lever and put it back on the handlebar, and then you close that one. That took me a really long time to figure out. It's time to show you exactly what I mean here. So I've got this filled up, all the air bubbles are out, the entire line is filled with fresh oil. What I'm gonna do now, I'm gonna take the lever off the handlebar and I'm gonna put it lower than the cylinder here. That way gravity is working in my favor and it's holding all of the oil in. Then I'm gonna take this off and close it up. Then I'm gonna put my lever back on the handlebar and close that one off. That should make it so no oil leaks out and no air bubbles get in. I think we got it. I'm all about the grind. Oh man, okay. Here's the deal. So this is something that's not required by any means, and it goes without saying that this definitely voids the warranty on your wheels. But something that a lot of trials riders who have hydraulic brakes do is they rough up the surface of the rims that they're riding. And you use an angle grinder, you take the tires off, and you run it on the outside of the rims here. You're basically just making a really rough surface area so your brakes grip absolutely perfect every single time. I would say if it's your first time doing something like this, maybe do it when there's another trials rider around, or I think a lot of trial shops would probably even put a fresh grind on the rims for you if you ask nicely. But this is kind of the last step that I want to take to make these brakes absolutely perfect. There's really no excuse at this point. We've got new brake levers, we've got a fresh bleed in the brakes, and now we're going to tighten up the rims with a fresh grind. This bike should be absolutely perfect when it comes to stopping after this. Here's a quick rundown of how I'm going to do this. First things first, eye protection, ear protection, and then I take the tire off here, but leave it in the fork so it can spin freely. And the most important thing, I think, when it comes to grinding rims is making sure the wheel doesn't actually stop, because if it stops and you're still pushing it on the grind, it's pretty easy to just like grind right through your rim And then of course it's game over. So we don't want to do that. Again, this is a light grind. You're roughing up the surface of the rim so that your brakes grab it. You're not trying to like grind the rim away. After that, you're going to put just a light pressure to get the ball rolling with the grinder and just do a little bit at a time. But the big thing, just make sure this thing keeps moving so that you don't accidentally grind through your rims, and you should be in good shape. I know I've said this like 8 times, but go slow. Don't do it all at once. Just get a feel for it. This takes a lot of time to perfect, and it's not the worst thing in the world if you undergrind your rims. Just don't overgrind your rims. I'm going to give you a little bit of a close-up of what my rims look like. Depending on the bit that you actually use, it may look slightly different. A couple people have different ways of doing it, but I use basically a 4-inch grinder, and that seems to get the job done. So you can see on the rim here, it's ground just enough to give it a little bit of an edge where the brakes have plenty of surface area to bite into. Finally, all the hard work is done. We've completely overhauled the front of this bike. New grips, new levers, new bar, new stem, fresh bleed in both brakes, fresh grind on both rims. We're pretty much good to go. Now comes the fun part. We're gonna test it out and make sure all the work was worthwhile. I'm gonna treat this like having a brand new bike. Even though the frame itself is 10 or 12 years old, with the new front end, this is gonna ride like a completely new bike, and I'm gonna treat it as such. So whenever I get a new bike, I try to do all the same tricks the first try. I wanna see how it feels on a side hop. I wanna see what gaps feel like. I wanna feel like riding up something, getting up onto the front wheel. All these different things I need to treat like a brand new bike, because essentially with this front end, it is a brand new bike. Brakes are working, that's for sure. Whew, that grind makes all the difference. I know this is a very obvious thing, but this bike is way longer than I'm used to, and so doing moves like lunges and wheelbase stuff, I'm actually taking a much longer bike, and it's taking way more effort than I would have thought. Let's try out some side hops. To be honest, this is a way harder transition than I would have expected. I know it's kind of just an adjustment thing, and then I'll eventually get used to this and this will feel normal. But man, I thought it would be a lot easier. I'm starting to like question my ability as a trials rider right now. It's weird to go back to square one. Honestly, like I feel like I've lost a bunch of confidence. Just having new brakes, having a new totally different feeling bike, and just having a couple little scares has kind of thrown me off. And maybe it's going to take more than one session. Maybe I was silly to think that I could just hop on this bike and automatically adjust to it and be able to do awesome things, but wow, it's definitely throwing me off a fair bit. I thought a lot about how I could get my confidence rebuilt, and I think that this side hop bar is exactly that. This is how I build confidence for everything else, working with this bar here and getting up and over it. So maybe just starting from square one on the side hop bar is gonna help me just get a better feel for where I'm going on this bike. Up to 30 inches, we're on our way. Three feet here, so something is coming back slowly but surely. I guess this is probably the way that I'm gonna get confident on the bike again, which is totally fine with me as long as it comes back. I feel like my form is still a bit wonky here, but at least I'm getting the height that I expect on this bike. So we've got a good starting point for sure. There's the confidence. I just tied my PR on this bike, but within like 10 minutes of riding this new bar and stem combo. So something is definitely happening here. The confidence is starting to build up slowly but surely. I was sweating it for a second there, but okay. All right, it's starting to click a little bit. I think it's fair to say that I've learned a lot through this process of updating my old competition bike, and I'm looking forward to testing it out a couple times this summer at some competitions in Bentonville, Arkansas, and maybe a few other ones. But if you're really getting into this whole trials thing and you want to start learning even more, I made an entire playlist full of every trials tutorial I've ever made, and it's right here just for you.